Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Imagine waking up one day and realizing you did everything right. You got the degree, you got the high-paying corporate job, you bought the beautiful house with the perfect lawn. You followed every single rule that society gave you. But as you look at your perfect life, you feel completely empty inside. A terrifying question starts playing in your mind. Is this all there is? This is the reality of the midlife crisis. It is the moment you realized you built a beautiful, expensive cage for yourself, and you are completely trapped inside. Today, we are going to look at the story of Arthur, a man who had everything society told him to want, but had the courage to ask the hardest question of all. Why? Let's find out what happens when the fear of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of changing everything. Arthur lay completely still in the dark bedroom, his eyes wide open as he stared up at the blank white ceiling. The house around him was totally quiet, wrapped in the expensive silence of a wealthy suburban neighborhood. On his nightstand, the digital clock glowed with bright green numbers, showing that it was exactly 4:59 a.m. In 1 minute, the automated alarm would begin to play its gentle musical tone, signaling the start of another identical day. Arthur did not need the alarm to wake him up anymore. His mind was already racing, filled with a heavy, cold weight that had been growing inside his chest for months. He was 45 years old today, a milestone that felt more like a prison sentence than a celebration. By every standard of society, he was an absolute success. He had the high-paying executive job at a top financial firm, a beautiful wife, a successful son, and a stunning home. He had followed every single rule of life perfectly, never taking a shortcut or making a mistake. Yet, as the clock flipped to 5 a.m. and the quiet music began to fill the room, Arthur felt an overwhelming sense of panic. He quickly reached over to turn off the sound before it could disturb his wife, Helen, who was sleeping peacefully beside him. He sat on the edge of the bed, burying his face in his trembling hands. The question that had been a quiet whisper for years was now a deafening scream in his mind. Is this truly all there is to my life? He had everything he was supposed to want, but he was completely miserable. The bright LED lights in the bathroom flickered to life, casting a harsh and unforgiving glow over the large vanity mirror. Arthur stood perfectly still over the porcelain sink, staring intently at the reflection of the man looking back at him. The face in the glass belonged to a stranger, a tired individual with deep lines etched permanently around his dull eyes. He noticed the thick patches of gray hair multiplying rapidly around his temples, a physical map of 20 years of corporate stress. Today was his 45% milestone, yet there were no celebrations happening inside his quiet mind, only a deep sense of mourning. He mechanically applied shaving cream to his jaw, his movements precise and practiced from decades of performing this identical morning ritual. This man in the mirror was a highly efficient machine designed to process financial reports, attend endless meetings, and pay a massive mortgage. He had built his entire identity on being dependable, predictable, and perfectly aligned with what everyone else expected him to be. He went to the right university, chose the stable career path, married at the socially acceptable age, and bought the correct vehicle. He had checked every single box on the invisible checklist of a successful life without ever asking if he actually wanted any of it. Now the cold water he splashed on his face did absolutely nothing to wash away the sudden, terrifying emptiness consuming his thoughts. He wiped his skin dry with a plush towel, looking at the expensive designer suit hanging neatly on the back of the bathroom door. It looked less like a symbol of high status and much more like a custom costume he was forced to wear every single day. A profound wave of loneliness washed over him as he realized he had built the perfect life, but completely lost himself in the process. The heavy garage door rolled upward with a mechanical groan, revealing a gray morning mist settling over the quiet neighborhood. Arthur backed his luxury sedan into the street, the engine humming quietly as he began his standard 45-minute commute to the city. All around him on the massive highway, thousands of identical vehicles moved together like a slow, metallic river of commuter traffic. He could see the pale, exhausted faces of other drivers illuminated by the dim dashboard lights, everyone staring blankly at the road ahead. For the past 15 years, Arthur had spent this driving time listening to aggressive financial news podcasts to maintain his productivity. Today, his hand hovered over the control console for a long moment before he deliberately turned the entire audio system completely off. The sudden silence inside the vehicle was incredibly heavy, filled only with the rhythmic, dull thud of tires hitting the highway seams. Without the constant distraction of stock market updates and corporate analysis, the dark thoughts in his mind grew dangerously loud. He watched the familiar green exit signs flash past his window, realizing each one represented another day sacrificed to a routine he hated. This highway was a straight line connecting a home he merely maintained to an office where he merely existed, leaving no room for adventure. A sudden, terrifying thought gripped him as he realized he was scheduled to make this exact drive thousands of more times before retirement. His fingers tightened around the leather steering wheel until his knuckles turned completely white, his breath catching painfully in his throat. The desperate urge to turn the wheel, take a random exit, and drive until the fuel ran out flared up deep inside his chest. Instead, his automatic habits took control of his hands, smoothly guiding the vehicle into the reserved parking structure of his office building. The elevator doors opened smoothly on the 12th floor, revealing the polished marble floors and glass walls at the corporate offices. Arthur walked down the long hallway, his leather shoes clicking rhythmically against the stone surface with a sound that felt entirely hollow. Every employee he passed offered a polite smile or respectful nod, acknowledging his high status as a senior partner of the firm. He reached his large corner office, where his young assistant, Clara, was already waiting with a steaming cup of expensive black coffee. She placed a massive stack of folders on his desk, enthusiastically explaining that the quarterly performance reports were ready for his final approval. Clara told him how much she admired his incredible work ethic, calling him a true model of professional dedication and corporate success. Arthur forced his mouth into a practiced, professional smile and thanked her warmly, maintaining the perfect mask he wore every single day. As soon as the heavy wooden door clicked shut behind her, the fake smile vanished completely from his tired, aging face. He walked over to the massive wall of windows, looking out at the sprawling city skyline and the muddy river winding below. From this high vantage point, the people on the streets looked like tiny ants, all rushing around with no clear destination or purpose. He looked back at the towering mountain of financial documents waiting on his desk, each page requiring his absolute attention and energy. For 20 years, this spacious corner office with the panoramic view had been the ultimate goal he sacrificed his youth to achieve. Now, looking at the expensive leather chairs and the mahogany desk, he realized the space was nothing more than a beautiful cage. He sat down heavily in his ergonomic chair, picked up his luxury pen, and felt the crushing weight of another empty day begin. The family gathered around the long mahogany dining table, the only sound being the sharp scrape of silver forks against expensive ceramic plates. Arthur chewed his expensive steak slowly, finding that the perfectly seasoned meat tasted absolutely like cardboard in his mouth tonight. Across from him, his wife, Helen, was talking animatedly about the rising costs of the new luxury landscaping project for their massive backyard. She detailed the prices of exotic plants and stone walkways, her voice filled with excitement about maintaining their high social status in the neighborhood. To his right, their teenage son, Marcus, sat completely slumped in his chair, his eyes glued to the glowing screen of his smartphone. The young boy was totally disconnected from his parents, his thumbs moving rapidly as he communicated with a digital world far away. Arthur looked from his wife to his son, feeling a profound and terrifying distance between himself and the people he loved most. He wanted to interrupt the conversation about backyard rocks and tell Helen about the black hole opening up inside his chest today. He wanted to scream across the table that he was drowning in their perfect life and that he could not breathe anymore. Instead, he kept his mouth firmly shut, terrified that uttering his dark truth aloud would completely shatter their fragile family peace. They loved the provider he was, the stable man who signed the checks and guaranteed their comfortable, safe suburban existence every single month. If he revealed that the machine was breaking down, he knew their admiration would instantly turn into confusion, judgment, and overwhelming fear. He swallowed his food along with his unspoken words, nodding politely as Helen asked for his opinion on the pool design. The silence of his true thoughts felt deafening in the warm room, proving that loneliness is heaviest when you are surrounded by family. The massive suburban house was completely dark and silent when Arthur quietly stepped out of the master bedroom around 2 in the morning. He walked down the stairs with slow, cautious steps, navigating the familiar hallway by memory until he reached the cold basement door. He descended into the unfinished section of the basement, where old cardboard boxes of tax documents and holiday decorations were stacked neatly in rows. In the furthest, darkest corner, behind a mountain of plastic bins, he found a long black zippered bag covered in a thick layer of gray dust. He pulled the heavy case into the dim light of a single overhead bulb, his fingers trembling slightly as he pulled the rusty metal zipper down. Inside lay his old acoustic guitar, an instrument he had not touched or looked at since his final year at university 23 years ago. He lifted the wooden guitar from its faded velvet lining, the familiar scent of old wood and metallic strings instantly bringing back a rush of memories. In his youth, Arthur had dreamed of writing original music and traveling across the entire country with nothing but a backpack and this guitar. He had abandoned that artistic dream because it felt too dangerous, choosing the safe, predictable path of accounting and corporate stability instead. Now, holding the dusty wood, he wondered if his comfortable lifestyle was worth the absolute death of his creative soul and inner passion. He spent the next hour simply touching the cold strings, not playing any real songs, but listening to the raw sound of the notes fade into the dark. He realized the guitar was a physical reminder of the man he used to be before he traded his freedom for a steady paycheck. On Monday afternoon, Arthur closed the door to his private office and opened a completely blank spreadsheet on his high-powered corporate computer. Instead of analyzing the company's multi-million-dollar investments, he began typing in the intimate numbers of his own personal financial life. He listed the exact current value of their suburban house, the balance of his retirement accounts, and the heavy monthly cost of their lifestyle. With a pounding heart, he created a new column to calculate a terrifying alternative scenario, the absolute minimum amount of money needed to survive. He calculated what would happen if they sold the massive home, cleared their debts, and moved to a small, quiet town in the countryside. The digital formulas processed the data instantly, revealing a truth that made his breath catch completely in his dry throat. The mathematical reality proved that they could easily afford to live a simple, modest life without him ever stepping foot in an office again. He did not need to work 60 hours a week for the next 20 years. The golden handcuffs were entirely a creation of his own mind. Yet looking at the reassuring numbers on the glowing screen did nothing to calm the sudden wave of panic rising in his chest. The math of freedom was incredibly simple, but the actual execution of the plan required a level of courage he was not sure he possessed. To choose this new path meant that he would have to voluntarily walk away from his prestigious title, his high status, and his professional reputation. He would have to face the judgment of his colleagues and admit to his neighbors that he no longer wanted the prize they were all fighting for. He stared at the spreadsheet for a long time, realizing that the ultimate barrier to his freedom was not his bank account, but his overwhelming fear of change. He slowly closed the file and hid it deep within a secure folder, feeling the heavy weight of his choices pressing down on him once more. On Saturday afternoon, Arthur stood out on the wide concrete patio, watching the automatic sprinklers spray water across the bright green grass. Helen was sitting nearby in a lounge chair, flipping through a luxury magazine while enjoying the warm afternoon sun on her face. Arthur took a deep breath, clenched his fists tightly in his pockets, and stepped forward to finally break his long, painful silence. He sat down across from her and explained with a shaking voice that he was deeply unhappy with his corporate career and needed a radical change. He told her about the private financial spreadsheet, explaining that they could sell the massive house and live a simpler, more meaningful life together. Helen closed her magazine slowly, looking at him with a mixture of intense confusion and a sudden sharp flash of absolute terror. She immediately asked if he was suffering from some kind of severe psychological breakdown or an early midlife crisis. She began listing their massive monthly obligations, pointing out the heavy car payments, the country club membership, and Marcus's private tuition. She angrily demanded to know how he could be so incredibly selfish when they had already achieved the perfect life everyone else dreamed of having. She reminded him of the decades of hard work they had both invested into building their high social standing and their beautiful home. Arthur watched her eyes fill with tears of frustration, realizing that she could not see the invisible cage that was slowly destroying his soul. To her, the expensive house and the corporate title were symbols of ultimate safety, and his desire to leave looked like total madness. He realized with a sinking heart that he was completely alone in his struggle, trapped between his wife's fear and his own desperate need for freedom. The confrontation ended in a cold, heavy silence that made the spacious backyard feel more suffocating than his small office on the 12th floor. The entire financial firm gathered in the main conference room on Friday afternoon to celebrate the official retirement of Mr. Henderson. The senior partner stood at the front of the room, his frail shoulders hunched inside a gray suit that looked slightly too large for him now. He had given exactly 41 years of his life to the company, working late nights and sacrificing every single weekend for the business. The managing director stepped forward with a wide smile, presenting the old man with an engraved plaque and a luxury gold watch. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat and delivered a short speech, his voice trembling as he thanked the company for being his true family. He spoke about his pride in the firm's growth, but Arthur noticed that the old man's eyes looked incredibly lonely and hollow as he spoke. Arthur knew the painful truth behind the celebration. Mr. Henderson's wife had divorced him a decade ago, and his adult children rarely called him. He had traded his youth, his health, and his personal relationships for a corner office and a title that would be replaced by next Monday. As the crowd erupted into polite applause, Arthur looked around the room at the young executives staring at the gold watch with intense envy. They saw an inspiring model of corporate loyalty and ultimate success, but Arthur saw a terrifying ghost of his own future standing there. A sudden wave of absolute clarity hit him with the force of a physical blow, washing away the lingering confusion in his mind. The fear of making a radical change was massive, but the fear of becoming Mr. Henderson 40 years from now was infinitely greater. He realized that staying on this safe, predictable path was the most dangerous thing he could possibly do to his own soul. He quietly stepped away from the cheering crowd and walked back to his dark office, the heavy weight of indecision finally lifting from his chest. On Monday morning, Arthur arrived at the corporate office building before any of the other executives or assistants had reached the 12th floor. He walked into his spacious corner office, ignoring the beautiful view of the city skyline and the massive stack of financial reports on his desk. He did not boot up his high-powered computer or check his overflowing email inbox, completely breaking his strict morning routine for the first time. Instead, he pulled a clean sheet of heavy white paper from his top drawer and unscrewed the cap of his favorite black ink pen. His hands were completely steady now, the terrifying anxiety that had paralyzed him for months replaced by a deep, immovable sense of inner peace. He began to write a formal letter of resignation to the managing partners, stating clearly that he was stepping down from his executive position. He requested a standard 60-day transition period to hand over his accounts, ensuring he left the firm with absolute professionalism and dignity. As he carefully signed his name at the bottom of the page, he felt an actual physical weight lift entirely from his chest and shoulders. He still did not know exactly how he would rebuild his marriage with Helen, or what kind of work he would pursue in the future. He had no guarantee of success, no prestigious title to hide behind, and no approval from the society he had served for 25 years. But as he placed the folded letter into a neat white envelope, he knew he was finally stepping out of the expensive cage he built. He looked out the massive glass window one last time, watching the morning sun break through the heavy gray clouds over the city river. For the first time in his entire adult life, Arthur felt completely awake, terrified of the unknown, but absolutely thrilled to finally be alive. Arthur finally found the courage to step away from the life he was supposed to live so he could start living the life he actually wanted. It is never easy to walk away from comfort, status, and the approval of everyone around you. The fear of change is real,
but the fear of staying trapped in a life that does not fulfill you is infinitely greater. If you woke up tomorrow and realized you were following the wrong rules, would you have the courage to rewrite them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced your own midlife why? Thank you so much for watching today's story. If this narrative resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life dilemmas and English learning stories. You can find all the vocabulary of the story down below in the description box. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and never be afraid to ask the hard questions. I will see you in the next story. Goodbye.